everybody, last Christmas, hey, shut up, I gave you this, and the very next day, no, shut up, I made this, which is the second model of this, which is the first model, yes, 1988 supercar, great. This one has the independent suspension, the 3 gears, the 4-cylinder square cylinder engine, it's amazing. But when I made this one, it doesn't have all those features. And I'm thinking, this second model, we can improve this using the same parts that come with this kit. Can we make something better? Can we beat Lego at their own game? I spent many hours creating. I present to you the 8867 Lego, well, it's not official number, 60s Formula 1 car, of which I'm quite proud, despite being a 42-year-old grown man. So I wanted a bit more realism in the construction and certain aspects of the suspension. So let's go over them. First of all, the engine is now a structural part of the car. That was, I think, pioneered in... framing, tire in my eye, yeah, that's better. So the engine as a structural part of the car, which I think was done first in 1967 with the Lotus 49 Formula 1 car. So literally there are pins on each end of this engine that connect to the tub and to the gearbox area and the rear suspension. That means there is no sort of scaffolding holding the front and the rear together. The engine is structural, which is really a cool design. I wanted the center of gravity to be way lower because these Lego cars have the seats really up high. Look here, look how the seat is way from the bottom of the car. Very high seat, very high center of gravity. Plus, I wanted 3 gears operated from the cockpit, as you see there with the gear stick, remaining that very low line, that really low car, while routing everything so that it works was quite a challenge. I also wanted space for the driver because especially in the 1994 version, yes, there is a nice seat in there, but there wouldn't be space for the driver. And the 1988 version, this one doesn't even have pedals. So this one has pedals, as I showed you in the intro. They are sort of here, but you cannot really... no, can't really see in there. There's 3 pedals, they don't do anything, but there's still leg room because the pedals are here, so it would sort of fit a driver. Of course we have steering and the gear operated here. So in order to get the gear lever, which is here, to move back, here we have that shaft that is connected to the gear stick. So when we move the gear stick, the shaft goes up and down, which then sort of tucks in a little bit, goes underneath sort of the suspension area and appears here, where you see it's sort of a selector fork-ish, not really. And that pulls this shaft with it front and back. So I can shift by pushing this shaft, and if I do that, how do I do that? Minimal fuel, no, we are obstructing. So now we are first gear. You see the crankshaft there. So that's first gear, and then we shift up. Second gear, which is here. And then we shift up again, third gear. So this fork mechanism is kind of nice as it connects through all the way to the side and then to the front, to the gear stick, which actually moves back and forth. Now the gears have to engage physically, so you kind of have to be driving in order to shift the gears, otherwise the teeth will go like that and it won't work. In order to do that, I had to sort of make like a little bit room in the engine. Gearbox, it's a big rear end, however these gears are quite large and I want them to be enclosed. So let's look at the drive line here. First, this is the top. So here we have the differential, which is then driven this very small gear. So we get a significant differential ratio, which is another point that's not great in the original models for understandable reasons. In first gear, the engine doesn't go very fast. With this differential ratio that is, I don't know, lots to 1, we get a lot more engine RPM in first gear. Of course, the available ratios in these few gears that we have mean the gear ratios aren't sensible, but that doesn't matter. So first step, we have the differential going up into this small gear, taking a 90-degree bend here, going down this shaft with the single gear. Then below that, which is invisible. So below the shaft I just mentioned, there's another shaft with 3 gears. So below that there is another shaft with 3 gears, same size, you can see that. And then we have to go to the other side, where we get the moving shaft when we change gear. And in all 3 positions there is always one of those 3 gears of the previous shaft engaged. So it connects, it's still connected from the wheels. Even when this has 3 positions, each position connects to that previous shaft. But each position here, now it's in the top, we have a small gear here and a large gear there. And if we shift down, we can manage to... Yeah, so the next gear, instead of being small gear, big gear, we have 2 medium gears. And then we shift down another time, maybe. Now it is reversed, big gear here, small gear there. So that's how we get 3 gears operated by this sort of selector fork going all the way into the cockpit. So then there is one more step, because now we are a little bit off center here. And we have to go to the middle. So there's another gearing there, 1-to-1 ratio, that also just bypasses this big gear here, which is part of the differential. And it wouldn't go underneath, so I have to go to the side. It just misses that big gear from the diff. Then we go down into the crankshaft where our V4 engine lives with squount cylinders. I complained a lot about the suspension geometry in the real Lego cars being parallel wishbone. We solved that here because if you look at the front, the inner wishbone, I've lengthened them, it hinges here, and the upper wishbone hinges there. So the upper wishbone is shorter, and that means you get a little bit negative camber with bump. And that was missing completely. We also get a roll center that's not on the ground. We get it wherever, if you continue the line, upper and lower ball joints through, yeah, you get a roll center somewhere. It moves anyway. I don't know if it's a good one, but it's there anyway. In order to minimize the bump steer, I had to connect the steering rods in a certain way, because I wanted them to appear very high, the steering rack to be very high in the cockpit, so there would be actual like leg room in here. So we have the inner pivot here of the lower wishbone, and the upper wishbone pivots right there. So here as well, it's a little harder to see. We get ever so slight camber gain with bump. And finally, when driving these Lego cars in the sim, I complained about the force feedback being terrible because there's no trail in the suspension and no caster angle. Fixed. How do I show it though? Car needs surgery. Look at that caster angle. By moving the upper wishbone backwards a little bit, half a whatever Lego unit, there is actual caster angle, which is great because now if we steer, there you see with large steering angle with the caster, well, this is the inside wheel, we get some positive camber, and on the outside wheel we get ever so slight negative camber. So there's actual caster angle, and there's also quite a lot of Ackerman in the steering, which was also there in the original model. And I would have preferred possibly to have the steering arms in front of the suspension. However, these white parts here, the uprights so to speak, if you reverse them, well, they still have to be on the inside. Yet if we want to have Ackerman steering, these mounting points for the steering rods have to be inside the wheel rim basically in order to remain Ackerman, which is impossible, doesn't fit. So the steering rack had to be placed behind the suspension. This bit was not supposed to be there. And these little pins here, the gray pins above the spring mount, alternative mounting point for the spring, makes it angled a bit more horizontally, makes it a little bit weaker because it gets a bit less pushed for every centimeter of upwards wheel travel. The spring moves us a bit less. It also gets us a bit more rebound travel because now the spring is fully extended. So that's an option there. Makes the car stance a bit more. Also messes up the roll center a bit and the geometry. So this looks best. Construction wise, there's a lot of verticality, like sandwiched here. Same with here on the front and back the suspension. These beams, that keeps everything together tight this way. And here where the tub joins, these are vertical beams as well, sandwiching it this way. There is a 2-layer chassis here, and here this vertical beam sandwiches this together, these lower 2 beams. And then in the front suspension there are vertical beams underneath the hood there and here on the side. So it is a pretty stiff construction. More so than this, because here you see the problem we have here. There it's single thickness, which is a bit flexy. So this was a huge amount of fun to make. I spent probably 20 hours on it. The individual sections, the suspension and gearbox area, the load-bearing engine here, and the tub, which is one unit. Very low, the seat is all the way on the floor. The driver feet, there's space for the feet. There's room to operate the little shifter there. Just about room, it's really tight. So, of course, Technic Lego from the 80s doesn't look aesthetically that amazing, but I think this is a really neat one. So you can make this, except 2 little parts that I will show on the screen right now. Tiny little parts that are missing from the original 8865 to make this 8867, a 67 Formula 1 car. But those are only 2 small parts. And of course here I would have preferred to use a red, but I ran out of parts quickly. But overall, we have mirrors, we have the DFV 8 sort of trumpets here, and 4 cylinders, squound cylinders. So yeah, I wanted to show that I'm really sort of strangely proud of what I achieved, having not played with Lego for a quarter of a century. This was very enjoyable, and I think this is a cool little creation. Anyway, work, what's that? I better do some? Yeah, probably a good idea. Bye bye.